All right, everyone, settle in, grab a seat. We have a lot of ground to cover today.
Yeah, for sure.
Welcome to the Psychology Undergrad.
Please, yeah, take your seats. We are reviewing for the Unit 6 comprehensive, and honestly, looking at the syllabus, this is probably the densest module we have to get through all semester.
Oh, totally. If you thought the stats module was heavy, just wait. Today we're unpacking outcomes and methodology in same-sex parenting research. And look, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is just, a social debate or a political thing. You're thinking about the news. But strictly for this course, for the exam, it's a methodology war.
That's exactly it. It's a clash between two completely different ways of gathering data.
Oh.
On one side, you have the long-standing academic consensus.
The textbook stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that's been in the textbooks for like 20 years, which basically says family structure makes absolutely no difference in child outcomes. That's the qualitative side.
And on the other side, you've got this new wave of big data, specifically the Allen study from 2013, which comes in and says, actually, wait a minute, the numbers are telling a very, very different story.
And that's the quantitative disruption.
That tension is what we have to dig into today.
Exactly. And we need to understand the historical context, too. The reading material focuses really heavily on the post-2005 era.
Right, 2005. That was the year Canada legalized same-sex marriage nationwide.
Which was a massive sociological shift. I mean, suddenly you move from these theoretical debates about gay parenting to having a whole generation of children actually being raised in these legally recognized households.
You just open the floodgates for researchers.
Completely. To ask, is this working? Does it look different from the quote-unquote traditional nuclear family? And more importantly for us as psych students, how do we even measure working? What does that mean?
It's the classic nature versus nurture debate, but with really high stakes. It reminds me of, okay, you know how in a feel-good movie everything works out because love conquers all? That's kind of the consensus view we've held for a long time. It feels good. It feels right.
Yeah.
But then you watch a gritty documentary where they look at the hard stats and things get complicated.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing today. We're moving from the movie to the documentary.
That is actually a really good analogy.
Yeah.
But before we dive into the heavy data, and we are going to get into some very specific numbers that you need to memorize, we need to make sure our brains are actually, switched on.
Which brings us to a super important point. Look, we're all undergrads here. We know the drill. Late nights, cramming, trying to synthesize all this complex information while you're basically running on fumes.
It's possible.
But the reality is, sleep hygiene is crucial for memory retention.
Oh, it's scientifically proven. If you're not sleeping, you are not encoding this information. The hippocampus needs that downtime. It has to move information from your short-term to your long-term memory.
Exactly. And let's be honest, dorm mattresses are they're terrible. That is why we're partnering with Cozy Earth today. We're talking about their bamboo sheet set.
I was so skeptical about the whole bamboo thing at first, I'll admit it. But the temperature regulation is significant. If you're in a dorm or, an apartment where the AC is basically a suggestion rather than a function, these sheets actually breathe.
They're incredibly soft. They keep you cool. And honestly, high-quality sheets like this are usually a total luxury item. They're just out of the budget for a student. We know every dollar counts. But because sleep is an investment in your GPA, we got you a hookup.
You can get a 21% discount. That brings it down to a range that is actually manageable for a student budget.
Yeah. Use the promo code PSYC101. That's PSYC101. Go to cozyearth.com/AIDS count PSYC101. Seriously, get the sheets. Your brain will thank you during finals week when you actually remember the difference between a t-test and a z-score.
Okay, let's get back to the syllabus. Part 1, the natural argument.
Right. So this is the first thing that always comes up in the course notes. It's the biological or moral objection. You hear this everywhere in the media, in religious circles, even in some evolutionary psychology discussions.
Yeah, the argument that same-sex parenting is unnatural.
Exactly.
And this is where we have to look at the Tom Spears article and the research by Bailey and Zook from the University of California. Because if the whole premise is homosexuality doesn't exist in nature, well, that premise is just factually incorrect.
It's wildly incorrect. The research shows that same-sex pairing is found in, nearly all animal species. We're talking bugs, birds, mammals, frogs. It's everywhere.
And this is super important for the exam. The why varies a lot. You can't just say animals do it. You need to understand the evolutionary psychology perspective on why they do it. It's not always for the same reasons humans might.
Okay, so let's use the lace and albatross example. This was the one that really stuck with me from the reading.
It's a fascinating case study in adaptive behavior. In this specific colony of albatross, you have a situation where there's a chronic shortage of males. The demographic ratio is just, it's all out of whack.
Right. So usually in a strict biological model, you'd think the surplus females would just not reproduce or fight over the few males that are there.
It would be a reproductive dead end for them. Exactly. Their fitness, their ability to pass on their genes would be zero. But they don't accept that. Female pairs form.
They actually bond and court each other.
Yeah, and they raise chicks together. They essentially co-parent.
And here's the key statistic from the Bailey research. This is the part to highlight in your notes. The chicks raised by these female-female pairs survive more often than chicks raised by a single mother.
That is the critical variable. In the harsh environment of the albatross, a single mother just can't do it all. She can't forage for food and incubate the egg at the same time. The chick dies.
But with two females, they can trade off duties. One can guard the nest while the other gets food.
It's an efficiency model.
So that's a huge blow to the whole you need a father figure argument, at least in the bird world.
Oh.
It suggests what really matters is biparental care. Two parents are better than one, regardless of gender.
It suggests that the family structure in nature is flexible. It adapts based on resource availability and demographics. It's just practical. Then you have dolphins.
Of course. Dolphins are always the example, aren't they?
Well, they're highly social. In bottlenose dolphins, male-male interactions, and we're talking sexual interactions, are used to maintain group cohesion.
So it's not about making babies.
Not at all. It's about social bonding. It's about building alliances and reducing aggression within the pod. It's politics, basically.
And then there are the fruit flies.
Yes.
The fruit fly.
This one is less romantic and more of a genetic error.
It seems so. The research suggests that in fruit flies, same-sex mounting is sometimes due to a defective gene. The males literally cannot tell the difference between other males and females. Which brings us to a really critical warning for the critical thinking section of the exam. We have to be so careful about anthropomorphizing.
Can we break that down for the freshmen in the back?
For sure. Anthropomorphizing. It's projecting human values, human psychology, or, human ideas of love onto animal behavior. Just because a fruit fly mounts another male because of a genetic glitch, we cannot use that to explain complex human love or societal structures.
Right. And just because dolphins use it for social bonding, it doesn't mean it maps perfectly onto human marriage. They're different things.
Totally. There was a great quote in the reading from Guy Grenier, a professor at Western Ontario. He was warning about the political controversy of this data.
He pointed out this massive tension. He said you have the liberal intellectual elite, his words, who might want to grab this data and say, see, being gay is natural. The penguins do it.
And then you have the family values crowd who feels really threatened by that.
Grenier's point was that the scientists, people like Bailey, are actually terrified of their data being weaponized by either side.
It's the whole is it natural versus is it good of fallacy. Just because animals do something, that doesn't make it morally good for humans. I mean, animals also eat their young sometimes. And just because they don't do something doesn't make it bad. But the takeaway for the exam is this. Biologically, same-sex pairing is not an anomaly. It is a standard, recurring part of the animal kingdom with specific evolutionary functions.
Precisely. It is adaptive. Now let's move to the human sociology, part 2. The consensus versus the critique.
Okay, so let's leave the animal kingdom behind. If you open any standard psych textbook from, say, 1995 to 2010, what is the headline on same-sex parenting?
The headline is no difference. The prevailing wisdom, which is supported by what's often cited as over 50 empirical studies and endorsed by the American Psychological Association, is that children of same-sex parents show absolutely no difference in behavior, cognition, or emotional development compared to kids of heterosexual parents.
The kids are all right. That's basically the slogan.
Essentially, yes. And for a long, long time, that was accepted as settled science. Justice Von Walker even cited this consensus in court cases about Proposition 8. It was like the bedrock of the legal argument.
But, and this is the pivot point of our entire lecture today, we have to look at the methodology of those 53 studies. This is where Douglas W. Allen comes in. He wrote a paper in 2013 that basically took a sledgehammer to those 53 studies. And honestly, reading his critique, it makes you question how some of this stuff even got published.
He argued that while the conclusion was nice and, socially desirable, the science behind it was weak. He identified a major validity crisis.
He called out 3 big problems. First, bias. He argued a lot of this was advocacy research.
Which means the researchers often went in already looking for a specific result. They wanted to support a civil rights argument. They weren't neutral observers. They were allies trying to prove a point.
Right. And second, and this is the big one we really need to unpack, sample size.
This is just shocking when you look at the actual numbers.
Yeah.
Many of these landmark studies had fewer than 100 participants. Some had as few as 6 to 40 families.
40 families, just think about that. Imagine trying to predict the outcome of a national election by polling 40 people in one neighborhood. It's absurd.
It is statistically meaningless. You can't generate a universal truth from 40 people. But it gets worse. It wasn't just that the samples were small. It was how they found them.
Snowball sampling.
Or convenience sample.
Okay, we need to explain snowball sampling clearly. It sounds like a fun winter activity, but in statistics, it's an absolute nightmare.
Okay, so imagine you want to find out the average GPA of students at our university. But instead of getting a random list from the registrar's office, you go to the library on a Friday night.
Right.
You find one friend who studies really hard. You ask them, hey, what's your GPA? And then you say, can you introduce me to your friends so I can ask them too?
Okay, so you're going to get a group of people who all know each other, who are probably all really studious because they're at the library on a Friday night, and who probably have similar backgrounds and majors.
Exactly. You are not getting the guy who's currently at the frat house party. You're not getting the student who's working 2 jobs and is just struggling to pass their classes. You're getting a convenience sample.
So in the context of these gay parenting studies, researchers were recruiting people at pride events or LGBTQ bookstores or just through word of mouth in these educated urban circles.
They were studying wealthy, highly educated, highly motivated lesbian couples who wanted to be in a study.
And of course, their kids are going to do well.
Right. The children of wealthy, educated, motivated parents do well. Allen's whole argument was, you aren't measuring same-sex parenting. You are measuring high socioeconomic status parenting. It was a classic case of selection bias.
And the third problem was the type of data they collected. It was all soft data.
It was all self-reporting, just asking a parent, so how is your child doing emotionally? Or how is your child adjusting in school?
Which is so biased. If I'm a parent and I know society is judging my family structure and I know this study might be used to help my community get legal rights.
You're going to put on a brave face.
I'm going to say, oh, little Timmy is thriving. He's so happy and well-adjusted. I'm not going to write down, actually, he's failing math and he cries himself to sleep all the time.
Exactly. It's called social desirability bias. So you've got these 3 huge problems: small samples, biased selection, and really subjective data.
Which brings us to part 3, the Allen study, the shift to big data.
This is the 2006 Canada Census study. This is why we're talking about all this today. This study was a total game changer.
So why? What made this data set so different?
3 main reasons. First, the size. Instead of 40 families, Allen was looking at a 20% sample of the entire Canadian population.
Wow.
We are talking about millions of records. He identified over 8,000 gay individuals and over 1 million straight individuals.
So we basically moved from using a flashlight to using a floodlight.
Exactly. Second, it was a random probability sample. You don't volunteer for the census. The government sends it to everyone. You get people from the cities, from rural areas, rich, poor, educated, uneducated.
It completely eliminates that library bias we were just talking about.
It does. You get the struggling families right alongside the really successful ones. And third, the data type. He didn't ask, how's your kid feeling? He looked at hard data.
Specifically, high school graduation rates.
Right.
Why is that such a good metric, though? I mean, school isn't everything.
No, but sociologically, it's an incredibly powerful proxy. It's verifiable. You either got the diploma or you didn't. There's no opinion involved. And it's a proxy for long-term success. We know that failing to graduate high school correlates with lower income, higher crime rates, poor health outcomes.
It's a hard variable that cuts through all the subjective feelings.
Precisely.
And he controlled for other things, right?
Yeah.
He didn't just look at the raw numbers. Because, I mean, obviously, kids with richer, more educated parents are more likely to graduate, regardless of their parents' sexuality.
Yes. This is crucial for your methodology section. You have to mention this. He used multivariate regression to control for parental education. He controlled for marital status. And he controlled for mobility.
Which just means how often the family moved houses.
Yeah.
Because we know that moving is terrible for kids' grades.
It's one of the single biggest predictors of academic failure, disruption. So he mathematically removed the influence of all those variables to try and isolate the impact of the family structure itself.
Okay. So, drum roll. We have the biggest data set ever assembled on this topic at the time. We have hard, verifiable data. We have statistical controls. What were the results? This is part 4.
The headline statistic is, it's startling, especially when you compare it to the previous consensus. Allen found that children living with same-sex families were about 65% as likely to graduate high school compared to children living in opposite-sex married families.
Whoa, hang on a second. 65%, that's not a small dip. That's a massive drop. That isn't a margin of error. That's a statistical cliff.
It is. To put it in perspective, they performed similarly to children of single parents, and significantly worse than children from married heterosexual couples.
But wait, there's a nuance here about attendance, right? Because my first thought is, okay, are they just not going to school? Are they dropping out?
That's the really interesting paradox. The data showed that their attendance rates were actually higher or equal to heterosexual families.
So they're showing up.
They're going to school, they are sitting in the classroom, but for some reason they aren't finishing. They aren't getting the diploma.
That's baffling. If they're showing up for class, why aren't they crossing the finish line? Is it bad grades? Is it behavioral issues?
Well, this is where we have to drill down even deeper. And this is the part of the review where we need to be really precise. Because all those previous studies, they usually just lumped gay fathers and lesbian mothers into one big bucket.
Just same-sex parents.
Right. But Allen separated them. And this is where the big aha moment happens. The gender breakdown it's wild.
Okay, lay it on us.
Let's look at the daughters first. Girls who were raised by lesbian parents were 45% as likely to graduate compared to girls in traditional homes.
45%. So less than half the graduation rate. That's incredibly low.
It is. But now look at daughters of gay parents. So a girl being raised by 2 men.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
They're only 15% as likely to graduate.
Wait, stop. Did you say 15? 1-5.
Yes. 15%.
That can't be right. That sounds like a typo in the study. I mean, statistically, an 85% chance of not finishing high school, this seems impossibly low.
I know. I had the exact same reaction. And to be fair, we have to be critical here. The sample size, the N value for gay fathers with teenage daughters in the 2006 Canadian Census was small.
Right. It's a very rare family structure.
It was at that time. So the confidence interval on that 15% is pretty wide.
Yeah.
The true number might be 10%, might be 25%.
But even if it's 25%, that's catastrophic. That points to some kind of systemic failure for that specific demographic of kids.
According to this specific data set, yes. It was the most shocking statistic in the entire paper. It suggests that this specific pairing, 2 men raising a teenage girl, has some really unique challenges that are not being met.
Okay, so what about the boys? Because usually if a household is struggling, you'd expect everyone to struggle.
This is where it completely flips. And this is where the stigma argument starts to fall apart. Sons of lesbian parents. They were 76% as likely to graduate. So lower, but doing a lot better than the girls.
Okay.
But sons of gay parents, so boys being raised by 2 dads,
Yeah.
they were 61% more likely to graduate than the baseline.
Wait, what? More likely. So boys with 2 dads are actually outperforming boys in traditional married couple homes?
The trend line was incredibly positive. Now, statistically, the result wasn't fully significant because the sample size of gay fathers was still small, but the coefficient was huge and positive. They seemed to be doing better than almost everyone else.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Girls with 2 dads are crashing and burning academically. Boys with 2 dads are soaring.
It forces us to ask some very uncomfortable questions about gender roles in parenting.
It honestly sounds like a sitcom trope. You remember Modern Family? Cam and Mitchell?
Of course, the gay couple.
Right. They adopt a daughter, Lily, and there's this whole running joke as she gets older where they panic because they have no idea how to handle girl issues. They have to call in Aunt Gloria to help out.
It's played for laughs in a TV show. But this data suggests it might be a real sociological phenomenon. Does a developing teenage girl need a female role model in the home to successfully navigate those years?
And conversely, do boys benefit from having, like, double the paternal influence? If one dad is good for discipline and drive, and I'm speaking in broad stereotypes here, are 2 dads just supercharging that?
It connects to that sexual division of labor theory from economics. The idea that mothers and fathers might bring different non-substitutable imprint to parenting.
Right.
The consensus view, the no difference view, basically says a parent is a parent, love is love, gender doesn't matter.
The Allen data seems to suggest actually a mother is a mother and a father is a father, and they might do different things.
That is a very controversial take in modern psychology. It's explosive. But the data shows that even in single-parent homes, boys usually do better than girls. But the gap in these same-sex homes is much, much wider. It implies there's something specific about the same-sex dynamic that amplifies these gender differences in outcomes.
Okay, but we have to be critical thinkers here. For the exam, we can't just look at the numbers and say, case closed. Part 5 is all about critical analysis. Why are these numbers what they are? Is it really just about the parent's gender?
Because correlation does not equal causation.
Exactly.
No, and Allen himself explores a bunch of alternative explanations.
Oh.
We have to look at the history of these children. This is the parental history variable.
Right. In 2006, same-sex marriage was brand new, so most of these teenagers weren't born into a modern family situation where they were adopted at birth by two dads.
Exactly. A huge number of children in same-sex households in the 2006 census were almost certainly born into previous heterosexual marriages that ended in divorce. The mother or the father came out after having children.
So the child experiences the divorce of their mom and dad, then maybe the trauma of a parent coming out, the stigma of that in the early 2000s, then moving into a new household with a new partner.
Precisely. So is the low graduation rate caused by the two dads? Or is it caused by the divorce trauma and all the instability that happened before the new family was even formed?
And we know divorce itself lowers graduation rates.
It's a well-established fact. So that's the parental history variable. And the census doesn't track that well. It just sees the current household. It's a snapshot in time. It doesn't see the 5 years of chaos that might have come before the snapshot was taken.
Okay, what about the mobility argument again? Same-sex couples move more often.
Right, but remember, Allen controlled for that. He controlled for how many times they moved, and the gap remained. So we can't just blame it on moving trucks. But maybe the reason for the move matters, which the census can't capture.
What about stigma? Bullying. This is the most common counter-argument you hear.
And it's a very strong alternative hypothesis. Are these kids failing to graduate because they're being harassed at school? If you're a girl with two dads in Canada in 2006, are you being targeted? And does that make you want to just drop out?
It's definitely possible, but then you have to ask, why would the boys with two dads be doing so well? Surely they'd be bullied too. If anything, homophobia is often directed more aggressively at males.
That's the perfect counter-argument. If stigma was the only thing driving these numbers, you would expect both boys and girls to suffer, probably equally. The fact that the boys are thriving suggests stigma isn't the only variable at play. It might be part of the puzzle, but it doesn't explain that huge gender gap.
Okay, we also have to critique the Allen study itself. We critique the small studies, let's be fair, and critique the big one. No study is perfect.
Absolutely. Fairness is key. The main critique of big data like this often comes from researchers like Runkle or Kramer and Howitt. They argue that when your sample size is over 1 million, even absolutely minuscule differences become statistically significant.
Can you explain that concept? Statistical significance versus real-world significance.
Sure. So if I flip a coin 10 times and it comes up heads 6 times, you'd say, okay, no big deal. But if I flip it 1,000,000 times and it comes up heads 50.1% of the time, statistically, that is a significant deviation from pure chance.
But in the real world, it's basically 50-50.
Exactly. So the critics argue that Allen is making a mountain out of a molehill, that he found a tiny, tiny difference and blew it up because his data set was so huge.
But is that a fair critique here?
Well, here's the problem with that critique in this case. A drop from a baseline down to 65% is not a molehill. A drop to 15% is not a statistical quirk. That's a canyon. The magnitude of the difference here is just too large to be dismissed as big data noise.
Okay, but the qualitative critique is still valid, right? The census tells you what happened. They didn't graduate. It doesn't tell you how the family felt or what the home life was like.
Exactly. The small studies might have been methodologically flawed, but they gave us richness. They gave us interviews. They told us about the love in the home, the relationships. The census is cold. It lacks the human element. It measures performance, not happiness.
There's also a definition problem with marital status in the census.
Yeah, this is a subtle but really important point. If a straight couple gets divorced and then one of them remarries someone else, the census just lists them as married.
So the control group, the married heterosexuals that everyone's being compared to, is not pure. It actually includes a lot of stepfamilies. It includes people on their second or third marriage.
Yes, which theoretically should lower the average performance of that group because we know stepfamilies can have their own unique challenges.
And yet, the same-sex group still performed worse than this mixed, imperfect control group.
Right. So Allen argues that if we could perfectly isolate perfect, never-divorced nuclear families, the gap he found might actually be even bigger.
Wow. That is that is heavy. Okay, let's try to bring this in for a landing. We've looked at the biology, the old consensus with its flawed data, and the new big data with its shocking but cold results. What's the synthesis here? What do we write for the conclusion on the exam?
The synthesis is that the no difference consensus is, at best, premature. You cannot look at the Allen data and honestly say that family structure makes zero difference. The outcome measures are just too distinct.
But you also can't look at it and say, same-sex parenting is bad. I mean, look at the boys with gay dads. They're killing it. They are outperforming the norm.
Exactly. It's not about good or bad. It's about it being different. And that is the nuance that always gets lost in the public shouting match. We need more research that combines the randomness and scale of the census with the deep personal history data of the smaller studies. We need to know when the parents got together. We need to know if the child was adopted or from a prior marriage.
And that leads to the final moral and philosophical question to chew on. Let's say the data holds up. Let's say, hypothetically, that 20 years from now, with even better data, we prove definitively that daughters of same-sex parents struggle more in school. Does that change the moral argument for marriage equality?
That is the big question. Should fundamental rights be dependent on performance metrics? I mean, if we found that kids of, say, parents who are touring musicians had lower graduation rates, we wouldn't ban musicians from marrying or having kids.
Right. We don't make you take a parenting test or a GPA prediction test to get a marriage license. It's not a thing.
So even if this outcome difference is real, it may not be a legal argument against the family structure itself. It might just be a parenting challenge that needs to be understood and supported.
Yeah.
It means we need to say, okay, maybe gay dads raising daughters need extra resources or awareness about finding female role models, not gay dads shouldn't be allowed to raise daughters.
And that brings us to our final thought for the day. And I want you to really think about this one as you prep for the final.
Go for it.
We spent the first part of class talking about biology and evolution. Millions of years of evolution have created specific, often complementary roles for mothers and fathers in raising offspring. We saw in the albatross, we see it across the animal kingdom.
Correct.
So if we are now moving into this era of widespread same-sex parenting, are we trying to just replicate that old evolutionary dynamic? Are we trying to pretend that two moms are the same as a mom and a dad? Or
are we creating something entirely new?
Exactly. Can two parents of the same sex ever truly replicate that biological mother-father dynamic? Or are they pioneering a completely new social unit? One that has its own unique set of risks, like maybe the graduation rates for girls, but also its own unique set of rewards, like the incredible success of the boys.
It suggests we shouldn't be judging these families by how well they mimic the old model, but by trying to understand them as a distinct, new variation of the human family. Evolution doesn't stop. This might just be the next social iteration.
And with that provocation hanging in the air, pack up your books.
And don't forget to review the Spears article for the specific animal examples. I guarantee they will be on the test. And seriously, get some sleep.
See you in the next lecture.